Okay, so think for a second about the most settled your life has ever felt. Money coming in, people who respect you, the safe, smart road laid out ahead of you. That quiet little, yeah, I've got this, life is good. Now, there's a guy who had exactly that, and he threw it all away on purpose. Franck Goddio, 36 years old, advising governments on their money, doing very well for himself, and he gives it all up to go and find a city that, as far as anyone knew, never existed. And nobody believed him. Every expert said it was a myth, a bedtime story, and they looked at him, this self-taught outsider, like he'd completely lost it. Here's where it turns bad, because going to find it meant dropping every single day into the black water off the coast of Egypt. And this is not the pretty kind of diving. The Nile pumps so much silt into that bay, you basically go blind down there. You can't see a meter past your own mask. One of his own divers said it dead straight. It's like being blind, and he's searching 150 square kilometers of flat, empty sea with no clue where to even start. So he dives. Nothing. Comes up. Goes back down. Nothing. Dozens of times. For years. And just sit in that for a second. You gave up the good life, the money, the respect, and now you're feeling around in cold black mud, coming up with empty hands while every single person who called you crazy gets to be right, not knowing if you just threw your whole life away chasing a ghost. And then, one day, down in that dark, a diver's hand closes on cut stone, a wall, and then a face. 5 meters of pink granite lifting up out of the black. The myth was real, and he had just found it. So let me back up and tell you how it actually went. Up top, 6.5 kilometers off the Egyptian coast, the water looks like nothing. Flat, gray, ordinary. You'd sail right past it. Goddio drops down, 10 meters to the bottom, and the daylight quits on you. This isn't postcard blue, it's silt. Nile mud hanging in the dark, eating the flashlight beam alive. 2 meters of visibility, and past that, green-black nothing. Then the beam catches something that isn't seabed. Straight edges, right angles. Something a person made. An edge of pink granite, a jawline, a cheek half swallowed by mud, and then the whole face staring back. Calm, idealized, unmistakably Egyptian, and far older than the silt around it. Goddio stops kicking. He just hangs there and looks, because he's tiny next to it. 5 meters of God lying on its side in the dark. Above the brow, the headdress of Hapy, the Nile's flood carved into stone. But the God isn't whole. There's a seam through him, then another, then another. 7 pieces scattered across the floor. He sweeps the light past the face and there's more. A bigger shape, flat in the dark. A second colossus, face down in the silt. A queen, granite, nearly 5 meters of her. And right beside her, a third. The matching king, toppled the exact same way. Then the floor itself changes. Flat slabs, cut stone, a pavement somebody laid, a whole column in pieces, its drums spilled apart like a stack of dropped coins. And this is the moment it clicks. This is not a shipwreck. It keeps going, every direction, further than the light can reach. A whole Egyptian city, scattered across the bottom of the Mediterranean. Lost for 1,200 years, not buried in a desert, not lost in a jungle. Drowned right off a busy modern coast while fishermen sailed over the rooftops for centuries with no idea it was there. The city even had 2 names, Thonis and Heracleion. But how does an entire mega city just slide into the ocean without anyone noticing? To figure that out, we have to leave the water completely and look at a mistake made over 2,000 years ago. So here's what this place actually was. Long before Alexandria existed, if you were sailing from the Greek world to Egypt, this is where you landed. First stop, the front door to the entire country, and it wasn't optional. Thonis-Heracleion was the one legal way in for a foreign trader. No exceptions. Wine, silver, oil, perfume, cedar timber. Everything the Mediterranean wanted to sell the pharaohs crossed these docks, and the crown took a cut of all of it. 1/10 of every cargo. At the heart of the city stood its greatest building, the great temple of the god Amun-Gereb, the beating center of the whole place. 3 colossal statues stood whole at its gate, towering over every priest and trader who walked in. Because this wasn't just any temple. This is where pharaohs were made. Royal power got confirmed and renewed right here, in front of the god. They worshipped a moon god here too, named Khonsu. And here's a fun one. When Greek traders looked up at Khonsu, they saw their own greatest hero, Heracles. That's literally why they called the city Heracleion, the city of Heracles. Once a year, this place threw the most sacred ceremony in the entire Nile Delta. The Mysteries of Osiris, god of the dead and of coming back to life, held in the month of Koyak. On the 29th night, the priests came for their god in the dark. They lifted a figure of Osiris, carried him down to the water, and laid him in a sacred boat. Then the whole thing moved off, not on any road, entirely by river. They'd cut 3.5 kilometers of canal between the two holy cities just for this one night. And the barges blazed with light. The texts say each one carried 365 lamps, one for every day of the year. Now here's the part that gets me. The divers found proof this actually happened. Down on the floor of that canal right by the temple, they found little boats made of lead, 34 of them, tiny votive models tossed into the water as offerings by the crowd watching the procession. And one boat down there was no model at all. 11 meters of sycamore wood, a real ceremonial vessel still resting on the seabed. Which brings us to one specific visitor, the first real historian who ever lived, Herodotus. He came through here, and the priests told him a story. Long before, a storm had blown a single Greek ship all the way to this exact river mouth. And on board, Paris, Prince of Troy, and the woman he'd run off with. Helen, yeah, that Helen. They landed right here. And when Paris's own servants turned on him and claimed sanctuary in the temple of Heracles, it was the warden of this harbor, a man named Thonis, who arrested him on the spot. The pharaoh's ruling was cold. Helen would stay safe in Egypt. Paris was thrown out of the country, which means if the priests had it right, the whole Trojan War, 10 years, thousands of dead, was fought over a woman who was never inside the walls. She was here, on this coast, the entire time. Why, Herodotus asked, would Troy burn to the ground for a Helen it didn't even have? And the priests said there was a temple here, to a foreign goddess, remembered as Helen's own. Hold that thought. Okay, one more thing about this city, and it's a big one. For 1,300 years, one question split every scholar who studied this coast. Was this one city or two separate towns? Thonis and Heracleion? Two names, one river mouth, and no way to prove they were the same place. Then in the year 2000, the seabed settled it. The divers raised a slab of black granodiorite out of the silt by the temple, a royal decree of the pharaoh Nectanebo I, carved in 380 BC. And on one single line of it was the name of the town, Thonis, the Egyptian name for the exact city the Greeks called Heracleion. One city, two names. After 13 centuries, the argument was over, and it was the seabed itself that answered it. So here's that mistake, and honestly, it's not what you'd guess. The reason a city this rich, this holy, this busy, vanished off the face of the earth was never in the sky, and never really in the sea. It was in the ground they chose to build on. Thonis-Heracleion was built on Nile mud, soft, wet clay, packed tight and heavy with water, solid enough to hold up temples and giant statues, but only solid enough for a while. Late in the 2nd century BC, the Delta coast got hit, earthquakes, and not just once. The shaking came back, again and again over years, and every shock drove down into that waterlogged clay holding the whole city up. Here's the strange part. Saturated clay shaken hard enough stops acting like solid ground. It starts acting like a liquid. Geologists have a name for it. Soil liquefaction. For a moment, the earth that's carrying a temple basically turns to water, and the temple doesn't crack apart, doesn't topple over, it just sinks straight down, heaviest stones first. And this is the part that really gets to me. It wasn't one terrible night, no single wave, no one big storm. It was a slow swallow over centuries. And through all of it, the people stayed. They kept living right where they were, raising new floors above the rising water. The last festival still came. The priests carried Osiris down to the water one final time, along a canal already half choked with silt. Then family by family, the city emptied. The houses their grandfathers built, going under one flooded room at a time. First the sea took the steps, then the floor of the sanctuary, then the gate itself. Every generation watched a little more of it go. And somewhere in that slow collapse, the temple came down on top of a ship and pinned it to the seabed for 2,000 years. While that's happening, 40 kilometers west, a rival is rising on much better ground. Alexandria, founded by Alexander in 332 BC on solid rock. a harbor that wouldn't sink, so the trade started moving west. The ships, the toll, the wealth, all of it followed, and the old front door of Egypt quietly emptied out. Still, the ground kept giving way under the great temple of Amun, the place where pharaohs were crowned, where Egypt named its own kings going under. By the 8th century AD, the sea finally closed over the last of it, and the temple of Amun became a flat, featureless stretch of open water. That's where 1,200 years of total silence begins. A temple still full of gold lying in the dark, and nobody left alive who knew it was there, just waiting for someone, someday, to come looking. Would you dive Thonis-Heracleion yourself, or let it stay buried? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Okay, so how do you even find a city the history books swear never existed? It starts weirdly with a guy in a plane. 1933. A British pilot banks low over a Bowker Bay and sees straight lines under the water, squared stone where there should only be sand. He writes it down. Then the war comes and the world just forgets about it. For 60 years, nobody follows the hint. Then one man reads that old note, and unlike everyone before him, he believes it. Franck Goddio, a Frenchman who goes after entire drowned cities the way other people hunt a single shipwreck. He's not chasing treasure. He's chasing a city that history swore had never been real, and he bets years of his life on a few lines in an old logbook. 1992. His team starts mapping the whole bay, meter by meter. A magnetometer drags behind the boat, feeling through the mud for buried stone. A sonar fish skims the seabed, drawing the dark into a picture, pulse by pulse. And for a long time, that picture stays empty. Just soft mud and more mud. Pass after pass, season after season. 100 square kilometers of nothing. 5 years go by. 5 years of a man insisting a city is down there, with nothing to show for it. Most people would have quit a long time ago. Goddio keeps the divers in the water. Then the year 2000, the readings finally tighten. One zone packed with buried stone. The divers drop into the green dark, and the beam finds walls, columns, statues by the dozen. After 5 years of mud, the city he staked everything on is real, and it is huge. Now he has to lift it. A crane arm reaches out over the water. Divers thread heavy straps under 6 tons of broken granite god. The cable draws tight. Silt lifts off the stone in slow brown clouds. The surface breaks, and water sheets off pink granite into open air, into the sun. 5.5 meters. The face of a god, streaming with the sea that hid him, and the man who wouldn't give up stands on the deck and watches his hunch come out of the water. It takes another 2.5 years just to make the god whole enough to stand. And when he stands, he's the largest statue of an Egyptian god ever found anywhere on Earth. And here's the thing about Goddio. He doesn't pack up and leave. Every season he comes back to the same water. And every season it hands him something else. 2001. The cable goes down again and brings up a queen. 4 tons raised whole. An Egyptian wig, a Greek face, a Ptolemy ruling on the old throne of the pharaohs. 2004. In the mud near the temple, his divers find gold. Coins of Ptolemy, still bright, like they were dropped yesterday. The sea never touched them. Because stone corrodes, bronze rots. Gold just waits. Then silver dishes for offerings. A pillar of pure lapis lazuli, the sign of stability under a fallen wall. And then his team finds a boat. 28 meters of acacia wood lying on the floor of the bay, built like nothing the Greeks ever made. Short planks fitted together like courses of brick. A rudder runs straight through the keel. And here's why that matters. 2,500 years ago, Herodotus described this exact boat, called it the baris. For centuries, scholars figured the old traveler had just made it up. Then Goddio's seabed handed one over. He had it right, plank for plank. And that boat is one of many. Around 70 ships scattered across the old harbor. 700 anchors, the largest graveyard of ancient ships found anywhere on Earth. And one small boat was sunk on purpose, laid right across the sacred canal, like a door pulled quietly shut. 2023. He opens new ground east of the Egyptian temple and finds a Greek shrine to Aphrodite, the same foreign goddess Herodotus wrote about. Greek weapons from mercenaries who once guarded this river mouth for the pharaoh. A Greek grave at the city's edge, holding a tiny gold god, best protector of the home, decade after decade. One man, one team, going back to the same dark water, pulling a drowned city back into the light, one piece at a time. and every season the mud gives up more. There's one thing in Goddio's logbook that's more unsettling than any of the gold. Not the coins, not the colossi, a warship, buried so deep no survey could even see it. A Ptolemaic galley, 25 meters of war, flat-keeled, built for the delta in the Nile. It was moored against the south wall of the Amun temple the night the whole city came down. And when the temple finally fell, it didn't fall into the water. It fell on the ship, crushed the galley flat, and pinned it under 5 meters of clay and broken God. So deep that for years no normal survey could find it. Just blank, solid seabed. They got it in the end the only way left. By listening down through the seabed with a sub-bottom profiler, and then under the temple floor itself, the divers found something older still. They lifted the stone, lifted the pavement they just cleared, and they reached wood. Posts, beams. Soft, dark, perfectly preserved in the airless mud. Wood that should have rotted away thousands of years ago. Wood from the 5th century before Christ. And these soft old posts are holding up something older than the temple standing over them. An earlier city. A city underneath the city they'd only just dug out. Then after all that dark water and drowned wood, something none of them had ever seen down there. Light. November 2025. In Giza, right beside the pyramids, the Grand Egyptian Museum opens its doors in sight of the only monuments older than Thonis itself. And the god, the queen, and the king, who drowned together, walk back into the light together. 132 finds raised out of the silt of Abukir Bay, standing upright in the air for the first time in 2,000 years. And yet, here's the thing I can't get over. Everything you've just seen, all of it is almost nothing. The colossi, the gold, the 70 ships, the boat that proved Herodotus right. All of it, 2 decades of diving, is 5% of the city. 5%. We have mapped the surface of Mars in finer detail than the floor of our own sea. And the clock is real now. Rising seas keep shrinking the windows the divers can work in. And that preserved wood, exposed to the water at last, won't last forever. For 2,000 years, this whole place was just a story. A line in Herodotus. Helen, a warden named Thonis, a king called Proteus. Now, after 1,200 years of silence, the legend has an address. 6.5 kilometers offshore, 10 meters down, a spot you can park a boat on top of. A god, a queen, a temple, a warship, a whole port pulled back out of the dark. And most of Thonis is still down there, still waiting. And somewhere out in that quiet bay, a dive lamp is still moving through the murk. One last light sliding across the stone face of Hapy, Lord of the Nile-flood, looking back through the silt the way he has for centuries. And the sea is still holding the other 95%. Up next, when Port Royal, the wickedest city on earth, and the sea swallowed it whole in a single afternoon.